Alright, how's it going, guys? Today we're going to be doing a review of the Hictop Tenlog D3 Pro IDEX 3D printer. Stay tuned. Alright, so for this review I'm going to be doing it in two parts. First part will be the cons, because I've come to notice that really when it comes to 3D printers, the cons are what make or break it. The second part will be the pros. So starting off the cons, the biggest con that I've found so far after owning it for about 2 to 3 weeks is there is no tensioning for the x-axis at all, and it beeps every time. There's no tensioning for the x-axis at all. From what I've seen and what I've read, at least there isn't. Funny enough, even though there isn't any belt tensioning mechanisms on the x-axis, there are belt tensioning mechanisms for the y-axis. The stepper motor in the back has slotted holes, so you can slide it back and forth to tension the belt. But apparently it's too complicated, or there is a reason that they can't for the x-axis. The next con is the proprietariness. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it could be a nice thing if you don't know very much about 3D printers. This comes in a box in two pieces. The X gantry, the Z gantry, is dismounted from the base of it, and you basically just pull both out of the box, and I believe it's 4 screws to screw the aluminum extrusion to the base. You flip it over. It kind of takes 2 people, or 2 or 3, to screw it, but after that you just plug and play and you're done. That's nice if you don't know anything about 3D. Well, that's nice for anybody really, because I got it up and running in less than half an hour. But it's not exactly the best for people who want to tinker with their machine and have the know-how to fix it if something goes wrong. If there's a short in this VGA cable, or if something goes wrong in here, you gotta end up replacing a motherboard or some proprietary electrical component, versus on the Rigidbot or the Annette, you just buy a heater block or buy a thermistor. It's kind of all enclosed in one thing, and I haven't actually even dug into the base of this because I don't really want to witness the probable mess that is, but it's just not very tinkerer friendly. So the next con is the beeping end stops, which really isn't it isn't a bad thing if you're doing considerable sized prints. It's really only bad if you're doing like a really small print with dual color or dual extrusion that's using both of these, because if it's doing a small print, one head will do a really small area, and then it has to go over and home, and then the other one has to home as well, and then it's got to heat up, do its thing, and then it homes, and they switch back and forth. Well, every time they switch, they got to home, and so it's beep, 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 and it gets old after a while. But like I said, if you're doing a big print or you're doing a single extrusion print, it's not that bad. The next con would be manual bed leveling, which isn't a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. I really don't care that much, because the springs and the knobs on these, it's such a nice setup and it's so rigid that it really doesn't get out of whack anyways. I mean, I'm not kicking it or anything, but it doesn't get out of whack. I haven't had to re-level this bed in the past few weeks, and I've printed on it quite a bit. Once you set it, you kind of set it and forget it, but it's just kind of, this day and age, is it that hard to throw on a BL Touch? Alright, another con for it would be the noisy fans, and again, it's really something that you can't help. Fans are going to be as noisy as fans are. You can't really quiet down the movement of air unless you go all in on expensive fans, and really for the price of this, it makes sense. This thing, you can barely even hear it until the fans kick on, and I think for the most part, it's not even really the extruder fans or the cooling fans, but the fans to cool the base. They have fans on the side, I believe, they kick on, they're pretty loud. I guess it's something you can turn down, but if they're kicking on for a reason. So you definitely want to keep everything cool. But it does get a little loud. Another con would be the time it takes to heat the glass bed. Again, it's the nature of the beast. For how big this bed is, it's like a 300 by 300 millimeter bed. Huge bed, and glass beds are known for being a pain in the butt to heat because glass is kind of resistant to heat. So it's not the end of the world by any means. But it does take probably 5 to 10 minutes to heat versus the extruders that take like 30 seconds to a minute to heat. Finally, the last con, and it's really, really a nitpicky one, and one that's kind of a edge case. The filament sensors, from what I've determined, and I don't know if it goes for all filament sensors or if these ones are special, but they don't detect TPU. I tried to run Amazon Basics TPU in here, and it wouldn't detect them. It said that the filament was out and that it kept stopping the print. I know a lot of people don't even run them anyways, so definitely not a big deal. Alright, so that wraps it up for the cons section. Really not any big cons other than not being able to tension the x-axis. I can see that being a problem down the road when the belt loosens. Now on to the pros. Start off by obviously stating that it is a dual extruder printer. And it's not like a whole lot of other dual extruders where two extruders are part of one mechanism. This one is an IDEX, which stands for independent extrusion. And so each extruder is independent of each other, and they're on separate belts, so they move independent of each other, which is really, really cool. On top of that, another pro is that each extruder is direct drive. And a lot of people I know prefer Bowden extruders. I'm not a fan of them. I've never really been a fan of them just because it limits you to the material you can use. I know they're getting better about that, but for now it limits your material usage. And direct drive is just so much nicer to play with. And these ones are really, really nice. Direct drive on both extruders is quite a benefit, and it's not lugging it around all on one single block. They're just like regular extruders like you'd find on another direct drive single extruder, but there's two of them. The next pro is the build size. The build size for this comes in at 300 millimeters by 300 millimeters by 350 millimeters. And while it's not the biggest build size, it definitely is quite large. Really, for what I use it for and what I see what I assume a lot of people will use it for, 300 by 300 by 350 is definitely big enough for most people. Alright, so another pro is the glass build plate. This is my first time with a printer with a glass build plate, and I have to say that I am quite impressed. It does have painter's tape on it, though, because I've found that painter's tape is just... It makes it so much nicer to just print and go, and you don't have to worry about the bottom layer sticking as much. But the glass build plate, apart from it taking forever to heat up, is perfect because it's just perfectly flat. And even though I'm using painter's tape now, I did use a glass build plate in the beginning, and it is textured on the top to help for build adhesion, and it is alright, but for smaller prints or for TPU prints, it is nice to have painter's tape to help it stick just a little bit more. Another pro comes with the IDEX capability, and that's its mirroring / duplication / multi-material or color capabilities. In the settings, you can select either dual material, duplication, or mirror. And I have not tested duplication or mirror yet, just because it is kind of more of a gimmick than a actual use. But basically, dual material is how you would assume to use it, where you can load one filament up with black film, or you can load one extruder up with black filament and one extruder up with yellow filament, and print two colors. Or you can go to mirroring, which if you have a small enough part, one printer or one print head will print the part on one side of the build plate, and the other print head will print a mirror of that part on the other side of the build plate. I can't think of an application where that's actually legitimately useful, but it's there if you need it. And then duplication is like mirroring, but it doesn't mirror your part. It just makes another carbon copy of it on the other side with the other print head. That one I can see kind of useful because then you can print two things at once without having to stop. But definitely some pros to having two separate extruders. The next pro are the filament sensors. And even though they don't sense TPU, and I haven't actually had to use them yet, I do appreciate having them, because if I'm out somewhere or I'm having an overnight print and it runs out of filament, it really is nice to know that it will stop the print and cool down the print heads so that it's not trying to print and waste energy when it's not extruding anything, and B, it's not cooking the hot end because there's no filament in it and it's just burning up the hot end. It'll stop the print and basically cool everything down until you can come back and say, okay, I've put more filament in. Alright, another big pro that this printer has specifically over my other printers is the touchscreen, and more specifically a color touchscreen. It is quite nice, and it's really responsive too. I mean, it feels like a phone. It really is nice, and compared to using like a little analog switch or a dial and a basic LCD screen like you have with the other ones, it really is nice to select, and it has a lot of functionality. You can home or your files, do settings, heat it up, bed level. It also has basically a one button push to unload your filament and to load your filament, which is really, really nice. You can do all that through a touchscreen, which is fantastic, and I cannot stress enough how much better a quality of life it is having a touchscreen than an old analog LCD display. It's so much better. So the next pro are the roller and aluminum extrusion setup, and that can be seen on both the y-axis and the z-axis, where they are using aluminum extrusion and the carriage is rolling on bearing supported rollers contacting that extrusion, and they roll really, really nice. It's super smooth and it's super quiet, and I definitely think that contributes to the quietness of it versus the traditional rod and bearing setup that will wear out over time. This probably will last a lot longer, and it's a lot quieter and a lot smoother. And for the x-axis, they are running on a slider channel, which I would assume is going to be similar to the x or the y and z axis in durability and quietness. Overall, just the motion system on this is far better than the traditional rod and bearing setup that my other two printers and a lot of other printers have. So the next big pro is how easy it is to assemble. It literally comes in two pieces, and they already have all the wires ran and everything. All you have to do is pull the z-axis out of the box, the base out of the box, screw them together, and then they already have the wires coming out of the side of the base to connect for the end stops and the z-axis motors. And then all you have to do is take your two VGA cables, plug them into the back, run them over, and plug them into the extruders, and plug in your filament sensors. I really had this up and running in under half an hour, and it was great. There's a video online, I'll link it down below, that will even walk you through how to build it, how to set it up, and most importantly, how to level each extruder, because this definitely has a unique way of doing that. And a very helpful video, and because of that, it was really easy to set this up. So another pro, kind of, is that it's quiet. And like I stated before, it really, because of the fans, it isn't terribly quiet, but it still is pretty quiet compared to other printers. The stepper drivers that they are using, I know a lot of companies tout using silent stepper drivers, but these are quite literally silent stepper drivers. The last pro that I would say is that it can print about any normal filament well. The only filament I haven't tested that's mainstream, that's considered mainstream, is ABS, but I've printed PLA, TPU, and PETG on this, and it's printed every single one of them without a hiccup whatsoever. This is by far my best TPU printing machine, which is saying something because TPU is not easy to print. Really, overall, it's a fantastic printer. And for the price and for how new IDEX printers are to the market, I wouldn't hesitate to buy another one. I wouldn't hesitate to buy a second one. Definitely my favorite printer, definitely my best performing printer, and it's put out the best prints I've ever had before. And I don't regret buying it whatsoever. And I think it's a great printer. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you liked it. Stay tuned for more content. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you liked it.